Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben, and today we're going to be looking at one of the most massive RPG releases I've ever seen, and that is Storm Hollow, which is a storyboard game that was kickstarted on Kickstarter several years back and has finally reached its full production. I was sent a review copy of this, and we're going to look through it and see what it offers in terms of physical materials and what its rules look like. Now, the first thing you're probably going to notice is that this thing is gigantic. This box weighs over 19 pounds. This is the deluxe treasury edition of Storm Hollow, and I believe it's going to retail for $250, although you can pre-order it for $175, I believe. There is going to be a smaller core set that just comes out with the most essential stuff, but this has everything, so we're going to look at everything that this has here. So it's a storyboard game. What does that mean? It is a combination of a board game and a role-playing game, which is an interesting idea. It's fairly ambitious, and I'm curious to see if they can pull it off. I haven't played it yet, but I am planning to run some sessions, and then I will report back with my findings. Let's look at what we have inside. This comes with a ton of stuff. Start at the top here. We have a map. This isn't just any map. This is a 2-foot by 3-foot full-sized wall map. Let me try and unfold it here. Here's a look at part of it. I can't get the whole thing in the frame. Gorgeous cartography. It shows the map of Storm Hollow, the world that this takes place in, with the different regions, which are called rifts. Lots of little details, lots of smaller locations within each of the major regions. And of course, this is a great wall map just to put up as a piece of art, and you can also use it for other role-playing games, right? It's just a beautiful world map. Next, it comes with some actual boards, because it is a board game. So, for example, we have this one, the Districts of Venture, which is a city location within the world. Same deal as the big map that I showed you. Gorgeous illustrations, lots of detail, lots of color, lots of character. You can imagine lots of adventures happening here. Down at the bottom of this board, you can see there's these 3 areas here: the invitation, the journey, and the big finish. These are the 3 phases that every game of Storm Hollow goes through. An interesting fact about this game is that it's intended to run in about 1 hour per session, which is a lot shorter than most RPGs. So it has a very strictly structured scheme to it that allows that to happen. You go through 3 scenes and then each session ends, which keeps things under a shorter time limit. We have another map. Now this is basically the same as the big wall map that I showed you, but it's done in board game form. So we actually use this at the table. And we have a series of books here. We start off with the Poppin's Guide to Adventure, just Venture, which is the name of the city. And really well-constructed books. They're all hardback, which is great, even though they're fairly small. They're very sturdy. They all come with red bookmark ribbons, which is a great touch. And I was looking at it, and the binding is sewn, which is a great detail and shows a lot of attention to the durability of this book. Most RPGs don't have sewn binding. Sewn binding is going to last a lot longer. You're not going to have the cracked binding that you find when it's glued, which is this is not. So that's just fantastic. It goes through and shows all of the different districts and the locations within each of the districts in the city. The game includes characters from real life or from folklore, like Tesla, for example. Gulliver from Gulliver's Travels. Now, one thing I thought was interesting is that the game recommends this for ages 13 and up, which seems a bit in conflict with the art style and the art direction. I think the art is very good, and for the most part, it's very unified. It has a feel that crosses across all of the different books. But it definitely seems aimed at, ages 8 through 12, not so much teenagers. By the time you're a teenager, you're probably going to have aged out of this type of world and want to do stuff that's a bit more mature and a bit heavier. I thought that was interesting. The rules are also a little complicated, which is probably why they're aiming at teenagers. But there's a bit of a conflict there, I think. I think younger kids could definitely handle this game, though. We have the Poppins Guide to Storm Hollow. Poppins are their words for player characters because player characters pop into the world and have adventures there and then pop out again. Similar to the Guide to the City Guide, we have different races that you can find there. We have details about all the different rifts. We have a gazetteer of the world. The rifts are all the different regions. Great artwork, great illustrations. No mechanics in those books, so you could easily give them to the players just to give them a sense of what the world is like. Or you could even use it, as I said before, in a different system because there's no mechanics involved. Pieces of a Broken World. So this is an adventure pack. It has a whole campaign that you can run players through. It is good 110 pages long. And it has the unique structure that this book uses when showing how a particular adventure works. You have the invitation, which is the first scene, and then the journey, going all the way over to there, and then the big finish. The layout for each adventure is a little strange in that the scene starts over here, goes over here, and then you move up like this, and then up over there, and then down with the big finish and down that side. It seems a strange way to lay out an adventure because it was counterintuitive. It took me a while to figure out the order I was supposed to read it in. But for the most part, it's clearly written, so you do understand what you're supposed to do. We have another adventure pack, The Whispers of Wonder. Just includes some more adventures, some more tips for writing your own adventures, which is definitely an option in this system. It came with this, which I thought was very amusing. This is a coloring book, which again makes me think that this is really aimed at a younger audience than teenagers. But it has some fun features in it. It comes with a little sticker pack. It comes with the Battle for Storm Hollow, which is a really interesting idea. This is a way to take all of these components and turn it into a co-op board game that doesn't need a game master. So it's basically a completely different game that uses the same components. That's actually a neat idea. We also have a series of postcards from the different riffs. Comes with a bunch of bookmarks. And here's our coloring book. Some of the images in the coloring book are very detailed, like this one, Adventure. So you could actually have a lot of fun coloring this, even if you're an adult, I think. But for the most part, there are simple, pieces of character art. It comes with a huge big pack of these. These are adventure planners, so you would use one of these to create your own adventures to run players through. And down here we have player boards. So it starts off with a game master board. Let's see if I can get this in focus. There we go. And it's a great way to summarize all of the rules. I was really hoping that something like this existed in the game. I felt a little overwhelmed reading the rules because there's a lot of things that are quite different, but this does a good job summarizing everything, or most of the important stuff, to make the game easier to run for the game master, or the storyteller, as they're called in this game. We have a specialized player board for each player class, essentially. And no two people can be the same class. Everyone has to be a different one. So for example, the Spark Collar. Now a cool thing is that it is double-sided. So it has a male and a female side, so you can choose whichever one you want, which is fantastic. You have your skills here showing how many dice you roll. It is a dice pool system. And you have some special powers, and you can put your kit over here. We'll look at that later. This can track your health. It's a great little player board. Other classes include the Lightbringer, which is looks like a paladin type character, the Storm Chaser, the Rift Walker, the Whizbanger, and the Tail Spinner. Now, these books are for the actual rules and the starting adventures, so we're going to get to that last. I want to look at just a couple of the other things that come with it. We have a big bag of custom dice. Most of the rolls are going to use these white dice, which are 50-50 dice. Half of them are hits, and half of them are misses, which are just blank sides. You roll a bunch of dice, you're trying to get hits. Usually one, but often more than one. And we have some specialized dice representing the different magical elements that you can also add to your rolls. We have a number of cards, including a huge big pack of blank cards for creating your own scenes and your own NPCs. That's really neat. And your own kits, your own item kits on the back here. We have one for characters, including allies and enemies. These are all huge, full color, very nice cardstock for the most part. Tarot-sized NPCs. So you can give your players a strong impression of what everyone actually looks like. And there's lots of details on the back, including the skills you need to fight them normally. And if you have an ally, then you have the type of stuff that they help you with. We have a number of meeples and specialized gems. You would put these on your player boards to track stuff. We have this series of maps or cards of the different districts and within the city, not within the whole world. So the different districts all have different names, and the fantastic thing about these is that there are rumors on the back of each of them for each area, including resources that you can find there. And these are on the back of every single one of these cards. So that's a massive number of possible adventure hooks that you could use. Again, totally system neutral, absolutely usable for any sort of game. We have a bunch of these. These show the results. They're double-sided of 2 ways that an adventure could turn out. You can give those to your players. And we have a giant stack of possible artifacts that they can find. Blast back jacket, the 7 league boots, Odysseus's bow, neighborhood. Can't quite read that one. Underworks access, Mask of the Wilds, and so on. So you can actually hand them out magical artifacts they get. We have a series of cards representing all of the areas or the special locations in the world map. The downside is that these do not have those rumors and resources on the back, which I really would have liked to see. But they do have rift shifts, which are ways that the terrain shifts and can alter gameplay when you go there. We have a series of kits. These are just item kits, and they have pictures of everything that you get. Big variety of those, including special talents that characters have. We have special powers over here. Fae, Spark, Tower of Nurturing, Ice Armor, Dash Duty, Ritual of Reinforcing, so you can really upgrade your characters and give them new abilities. We have a huge pack of tarot-sized scene cards. So as I said, the game takes place over 3 scenes. You actually can put one of these out to show what the scene looks like. The amount of art put into this is really kind of staggering, with information on the back about how it works. And lastly, we have these. These are like little boards that you use to track information, especially near the end of each game. When you're fighting the big bad guy, you can track how bad the threat is, how close you are to disaster, how much progress you've made, and how much time has passed. It's actually seemed a little fiddly to me that you have all of these trackers going at the same time, but I guess it's nice to have the trackers because it makes things more visual. All right, let's look at the actual rules. So, like I said, there's 3 phases, 3 scenes that you go through. And that right off the bat gave me a little bit of pause because that's very structured for an RPG. However, you really have to take into account what this game is trying to do. It's trying to blend RPGs and board games. So you're going to have some elements of both. And the question is whether you can reconcile the 2 kind of opposing forces of those 2 types of games. Board games like to be very mechanically driven, like to be very clear, like to be very strategic. And role-playing games are very open and free-form by nature. So within this game, when you're in one of the 3 scenes, there is a lot of free-form role-playing you can do. You can try creative solutions, which is excellent. However, you really can't wander outside of the scenes. The game doesn't really provide for that, and it wouldn't work with the structure that it gives you. So whether that's going to cause a lot of mental conflict within the players or not is, I think, really going to depend on your group. And I think it would depend a lot on making sure that your players were really on board with the type of game that's being played and what the game expects of them. Otherwise, they're going to be maybe a little troubled by what they are and aren't allowed to do. It gives you an introduction, gives you the types of players, gives you all the different tools that you're going to be using. tons of illustrations and diagrams, which is really great. How a game tends to work, including the dialogue that you would usually use. A general game overview. So there's 3 phases. Your first phase within each scene would be you talk to the other people and you plan what you're going to do. Then you take actions where you roll your dice and you try and get those hits in order to succeed. And then finally you have your results where the game master or the storyteller says what happened as a result of your dice rolls. Now, it's impossible to die in this game, which is another thing that makes me think it's lending itself more towards younger players. You can be kind of taken out of action for a little while, but you're always going to come back. Magic, anyone can use magic within the game. You can have different kits to gear yourself up for adventure. Using the right items at the right time gives you bonuses. You're going to be setting up a scene. Now, going on an adventure, I like the fact that they recognize that there's really 2 types of game masters that like a more improvisational style and ones that like it more structured. However, really you are pretty limited. You can't really do a free-form game of this without throwing out a lot of the rules and structure that it gives you. I think it would be possible. The actual resolution mechanics, rolling your dice to see what happens, could easily lend itself to an open world free-form game, but you would just not be using a lot of the game, frankly. One thing that I'm concerned about is that the game gives a lot of structure because I think it's trying to make running a role-playing game easier. What it's trying to do is to say, running a full improv game is really hard, so we're going to give you these scenes, you're going to run through them, and it's going to tell a complete story. But by mechanizing everything and making everything very structured, I feel like it might actually add more to the burden of the game master in terms of prep. I'm not sure whether that's actually true, though, because I haven't played it yet. But there's a lot of things you have to track, which is very different than what you'd see in a typical RPG. One thing I noticed right over here is that this actually has instructions and advice on how to railroad players, which in a normal RPG I would regard as anathema, basically. But because this is so intentionally structured, and if players have all bought into that, it's not really a big deal. In fact, I would think that railroading players wouldn't necessarily be that necessary if everyone is really on board with how the game is supposed to work. And we have some advice on how to dial up and down the wonder, drama, or challenge level of a particular adventure. Let's take a quick look at some of the adventures that you get. This book has a number of adventures that are suitable for just starting out. It tells you how to introduce the players to the game, how to give them their starting equipment, and it has advice on how an adventure is supposed to be run. It has box text that you have to read to the players. And when you get to the big finish, which is often a big boss fight or some other large event, it has a lot of details about how it's supposed to work using all of the different trackers. Enemies have different action grids, different special effects they do depending on how damaged they are. You have different ways to earn progress. You have different ways to lower the threat that the enemy is causing. And there's different reveals that can be triggered when you roll different combinations of dice. This is all well and good, but this seems like it would be hard to write one of these on your own, just because there's so many details you would have to put into it for only, as I said before, an hour of game time. However, if you're not really into running your own adventures, there are a lot of these offered in the book, so you could run these for quite a long time. One nice thing that it does give you is that near the end of the book, there is a section with just scenes to go. So it's not full adventures, it's just scenes with things to do inside them. So you can grab a bunch of scenes and then cobble them together into your own adventure. There we go. So that's it for Storm Hollow. It's a really interesting game. It's definitely ambitious. It's definitely trying something I haven't really seen someone try to do before. Whether it's successful enough is going to be seen. And once I play a couple games with my fifth graders, my group of fifth graders that I tend to run games with, we will definitely see what the advantages and disadvantages of this are. And I'm going to report back with another video. I would definitely take a look at this. I'm going to put links down in the comments where you can find some PDFs related to it and where you can find more information about the game. I believe that the full thing has not been completely released yet. It's going to be released soon. So hopefully this preview was informative to you and gives you something to talk about. Write down in the comments if you have any comments about the way this is structured and whether you think it would be right for your group. Check out my channel over here. You can subscribe to see more reviews of role-playing games like this one. You can join me on Patreon if you want to support me making videos like this. And thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you guys later.